the strength of my heart. Oh, you are the strength of my heart. I can rely on you. Yes, I can rely on you. When my heart is overwhelmed, I will look to you alone. God, my rock, God, my rock, God, my rock. When I've struggled to believe, you did not let go of me. God, my rock, God, my rock, God, my for thee, and hail him as thy matchless King through all eternity. Crown him the Lord of love, behold his hands and side, those which yet visible above, in beauty glorified. All hail, Redeemer, hail, for thou hast died for me. Thy praise and glory shall not fail throughout eternity. Crowning the Lord of life, who triumphed o'er the grave, and rose victorious in the strife for those he came to save. His glories now we see, who died and rose on high, who died eternal life to bring, and lives that death we died. Crown him the Lord of heaven, one with the Father, Lord, one with the Spirit, through him in from yonder glorious throne. To thee be endless praise, for thou for us hast done. Be thou, O Lord, through endless days, adored and magnified.
Well, good morning to the First Baptist family, and I want to say a special word to those who are the guests of the First Baptist family. Maybe you're joining us in online worship for the first time, or you've never filled out any information. If you would take just a few minutes today and go to our website, tulsafbc.org, it has a button there called This Is My First Time, I'm a First-Time Guest. We want to have some information about you, and we also want to make a gift in your honor to Compassion International that is serving some young and expectant mothers in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. We'll make a gift in your honor. Now, if you want to kind of take a shortcut, we've also made it easy. There's a QR code in the lower corner of your screen today. You can drop down on your iPhone, that control center panel. There should be a QR code scanner right there. Scan the QR code. It'll take you right to our guest page. Fill out that information. And we would love to make a gift in your honor to Compassion International. You joining us for worship today can make a difference in the life of somebody else. And so also on our website or through our app, you can see all the announcements going on in our church family. I'd have you note that September is the month that we collect coats and blankets. And so please, around your house, if you have those extra coats and blankets that you're not going to be using, we could use those at the Caring Center to hand out to our clients that we serve over the course of this next winter. And also, you heard me announce this week about our Bring the Change Sunday. And for those of you who are kids, young kids, preschoolers, children in our church, I want to invite you between now and October 11th to collect all the change you can from around your house. Your parents, piggy bank, your piggy bank, maybe their middle console in their car, your parents' purses, wallets, safety deposit boxes, wherever you can find some change. And bring that to church, even if you are still social distancing at home, to take a special trip downtown on Sunday morning, October 11th. Our staff members will be out in our little pull-up area. You can drive through, drop off that change. Now, what is that going to do? Every dollar of change that you can bring is going to feed one child for one day. Right now, through Compassion International, there are 250,000 unsponsored kids. For every dollar in change we bring, we're going to give it all to Compassion, and that dollar will feed one child for one day. I know that I have enough change in my car right now that I could probably feed 10 kids Why not take something I'm not going to miss, give it away, and see some good that will come as a result? So we are continuing our teaching series on being unoffendable, and I want to ask you a question today, and this is going to be the question that we really spend our whole time considering. Would you rather, as you go through life, as you go through today, would you rather feel safe or would you rather be strong? And I want you to think about that, okay? Really think about it. As you move through today, would you rather feel safe or would you rather be strong? Let me tell you the story of George and Sarah Hickson. George and Sarah had a little baby boy, and everything seemed to be normal at the beginning, but they noticed after a few weeks that their little baby boy, Michael, wasn't responding to facial cues, wasn't really responding when lights were shown on his face, and so they took him back to the doctor, and of course this was several decades ago. They realized their little baby Michael was born blind. So George and Sarah were encouraged to institutionalize their child, let somebody else deal with his blindness. But they said, no, we will raise our child ourselves. And they made a decision not to always make sure their son felt safe, but to make sure that he grew up strong as a blind child in a sighted world. And so get this, when he was a toddler, they bought him a tricycle. And they let him ride his tricycle around the house. So how did he learn not to bump his head on the coffee table? By bumping his head on the coffee table. And this little boy, Michael Hickson learned how to use sound waves that his body was producing like sonar, and he learned to track himself around the house flying on his tricycle. And so a few years later, when Michael Hickson became a young man, a young boy, they bought him a bicycle, and they let him ride around in the neighborhood, a blind child riding a bicycle. Neighbors called the Hickson house, said, do you know your son's out riding a bicycle? He crashed into a parked car. And George and Sarah would go, there's only one way he's going to learn not to run into parked cars, and that is to run into parked cars. So now fast forward when Michael Hickson is now a grown man, 47 years old. He's in the North Tower of the World Trade Center on September 11th. And when the plane crashed into the adjacent building, he begins to work his way out of the building, he and his guide dog, Roselle. And as they're in the stairwell, going down, 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 the stairwell grows dark and smoky. And you know what? Because Michael Hickson had grown up not prioritizing safety, but prioritizing strength, he knew how to get himself out of the World Trade Center, and not only that, when the stairwell went dark, he knew how to guide others out as well. He grew up not always feeling safe, but learning how to be strong. So I want to ask that question again. Today, or as you live, would you rather feel safe or would you rather be strong? Now let me answer that question for me. I want to feel safe, but God is my parent. God, as a good Father, wants me to learn how to be strong in the world in which I live. So that applies to being unoffendable. And I just want you to think about where we've been so far. Really, one of the great principles of being unoffendable is this, that of all the people on the planet, Christians should be the least offended, the least possible to offend. Why? Because Jesus Christ has forgiven all of our offenses. And because we have been forgiven all of our offenses, we become more forgiving to other people. We talked about this last week, that the source of offense is not so much what's happening on the outside, it's what's happening on the inside. People cannot offend you apart from your cooperation. People cannot offend you apart from your permission. You have a choice to be unoffendable. Now today, I really want us to sit on this idea. As we go through the world, as we go through life, do we put a greater value on feeling safe or being strong? And I believe Jesus wants us to be strong. So I want you to listen to these words from Luke 6, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Jesus says this, I say to you who listen. There's a challenge there. Will you really listen to what Jesus says? Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who persecute you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone strikes you on the cheek, offer him the other also. If someone takes your coat, let him take your shirt as well. Don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. And if anyone takes your things, don't ask for them back. Just as you want others to do to you, do the same to them. So this is just one paragraph from the teachings of Jesus, but I would contend that in order to do what Jesus says here, that we need to become unoffendable. In order to do what Jesus says here, we need to put a greater priority on being strong and not always wanting to feel safe. So he starts with these words, love your enemies. I think it's pretty important here to define love, because love is not a feeling. If we're waiting to have those feelings of love toward our enemy, that's probably not going to happen. So what is love? Love is when you will and work towards somebody's best interest. It's a decision, not a feeling. So when it comes to enemies, even though you don't have the feelings of love, you can still will and work toward their best interest. Now, in this command, Jesus says, love your enemies. Do you see anywhere in this command where Jesus says, except when? No. This is an all-inclusive statement. Love your enemies. We want Jesus to say, except during an election year. And by the way, this is a great example. This is a great opportunity for followers of Jesus to obey this hard command of Christ, especially during an election year, because he doesn't say, hey, love your enemies except if somebody has a different political opinion. So I really want you to see what's happening in our world with a critical and maybe even a Christ-like eye here. There are two ways to do politics, and they have larger titles than this, but one is called a common humanity politic. That, as you view the political environment of the world, you see all of humanity as being in the same situation where we're kind of all in this together, and you're choosing the candidate you want because you believe that they will serve the common good the best, okay? And it's this language of, hey, we're all in this together, let's serve the common interest, right? But there's another way of doing politics. Instead of a common humanity politics, there's a common enemy politics. Now listen to what you've heard, especially in our national election, in our rhetoric of vote for me because we can't let this other person get into office. We must stop this other, and by the way, both sides are doing this. It's not a common humanity politic. It's not, hey, we have some problems that we'll address together. It is that person over there must be stopped. So you're voting for a candidate, not because of your love for the candidate, but because of your hatred for the other party. That they must be stopped at all costs. That is completely opposite of the teachings of Jesus Christ. There is no exception clause in here. He says this, and he challenges us to do this, that we are to show our love for other people. And our love for people is, we do not distinguish between friends and enemies. We don't distinguish between allies and enemies. We love all people the same way. We will and work toward their best interest. Now, here's how he says to do that. Love your enemies. And just notice what he says here. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Here's what's going to require us to be strong and not play it safe. Jesus says if you have an enemy, you are to take initiative. You're not just to wait back and stew. You're to take initiative in how you serve that enemy. You are to will and to work towards somebody's best interest. Do you see what he's saying here? The people that offend you the most are the very people I'm calling you to serve. Take the initiative. God forbid you're ever taken hostage. I hope that never happens. But hostage negotiators say that the best thing to do if you're ever taken hostage is to start talking with your captor. Your captor sees you as an object, and what your captor needs to do is to see you as an individual. So you strike up a conversation. You talk about the weather. You talk about your spouse. You talk about your children. You let them see you as a person. Right now, it seems that culture is holding our emotions hostage, that we're taught to feel this anxiety and fear and hatred. You know what we need to do? Instead of demonizing other people, we need to humanize other people. And because we are followers of God, because we are followers of Christ, be bold enough and strong enough to not play it safe, but to take initiative. Now, Jesus gives 3 examples on how he wants us to take initiative and under what circumstances, okay? So he says, I want you to listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. And then he gives 3 scenarios, 3 little vignettes. And he says, here's how I want you to practice, not playing it safe, but being strong. I want you to practice this when people insult you, when people blame you, and when people manipulate you. And we're going to look at those one at a time here in just a minute. By the way, I didn't mean to do this, but insult, blame, manipulate, it spells IBM. I did not do that on purpose. As I was kind of mapping out this message, I go, oh, just happens to spell IBM. So that's an interesting way to remember these things. So let's start with insulting. Jesus says, when people insult you, I don't want you to play it safe. I want you to be strong. If somebody strikes you on the cheek, turn to him the other also. So this is my twisted sense of humor. There's some really funny videos on the internet about slapping chickens. Yes, you're wondering where I'm even regretting even bringing this up, but it's the idea. Somebody postulated the question, how hard would you have to slap a chicken in order to cook it? You know, when you cook something, you transfer energy into that meat. So is it possible to slap a chicken so hard? Why am I even telling you this story? Is it possible to slap a chicken so hard that it actually cook it on the spot? Well, physicists have kind of started to unpack this idea, and yes, it would be possible to cook a chicken by slapping it, but you'd have to slap it at 3,725.95 miles per hour, okay, which is impossible for a human to do. By the way, the downside of trying to cook a chicken by slapping it is not only would you cook the chicken if you could slap it that hard, but you would also cook your hand. There would be so much impact, so much energy right there. I probably won't tell this story on Sunday morning. It's just going really downhill, right? But I want you to get this. Jesus uses an illustration of slapping here. And if somebody slaps you, it's going to burn you up, right? So actually, the reference Jesus uses here in culture, if somebody strikes you on the right cheek, in order to strike somebody on the right cheek, if you're right-handed, you would have to backhand them. And in the Jewish culture, to slap somebody backhanded is an insult, okay? Jesus says, if they do that, if somebody insults you, offer him the other cheek also. So if you turn the left cheek, the only way now for a person to hit the left cheek is to take the open palm and slap that person, which in Jesus' culture, this is an insult. This forward slap is cruelty. Jesus says, when people insult you, I don't want you just to take it, but I want you to think about creative ways. Think creatively about how you can expose that person's cruelty either to their own heart, that once they slap you, they realize how cruel they've become, or even if they don't realize it, everyone else around them sees their cruelty. You know what Martin Luther King Jr. said? He said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hatred cannot drive out hatred. Only love can do that. Listen, if when somebody insults you and somebody slaps you, you slap them back, if you treat an enemy like an enemy, don't be surprised if they remain an enemy. But if you treat an enemy with love and you look for creative ways to maybe throw them off their guard just a little bit. So let me give you an example of this. This is a real life situation, and I'm going to use Jerry Falwell as an example. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge Jerry Falwell fan. I wasn't when he was alive. I wasn't a big fan of the moral majority. But if you remember years ago, he was in a lawsuit with Larry Flint. Now, Larry Flint was the CEO, the publisher of Hustler magazine. And Larry Flint wrote up a little parody about Jerry Falwell, a very religious person. in his magazine. Jerry Falwell sued, and what went back and forth was about 5 years of mutual name-calling between the two of them. So after the lawsuit was settled in Larry Flint's favor, Jerry Falwell lost this lawsuit. They were both invited to appear on Larry King Live, and ratings were through the roof because they wanted to see these two people on the opposite ends of the political and moral spectrum go at one another. Well, what happened during that interview that night is at one point, Jerry Falwell leaned over and hugged Larry Flint. He hugged Larry Flint, and Larry Flint said, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with that. He leaned over and he hugged me. So the next day, Larry Flint in his office at Hustler magazine, he gets beeped on his intercom that Jerry Falwell's in the lobby and wants to see him. The two of them sit down for a couple of hours. They have a conversation, and they agree to go on a speaking tour together to talk about their very different ideologies from one another. And over the course of several years, they became friends. And when Jerry Falwell passed away, Larry Flint wrote his obituary in the Los Angeles Times, and it was titled, Jerry Falwell, My Friend. What happened? It started with a hug. I wonder if we hugged a little bit instead of slapping, not just literally, but if we found creative ways to catch enemies off guard, maybe we show them that there is another way to live rather than just slapping insults and cruelty. So Jesus says, don't even be offended when people insult you. Don't be offended when people blame you. If someone takes your coat, let them have your shirt as well. In another gospel, Jesus even says, if somebody wants to sue you, if somebody wants to blame you and take your coat, let them have the shirt off your back as well. So this whole teaching series is about being unoffendable. We need to turn this around now and look at what if other people blame us because we have offended them? What if they come to us and say that we are the source of offense and they take on the posture of blaming? So here's the best thing that I've learned in preparation for this teaching series. Sometimes people say offensive things. And if they say something intentionally offensive, then we kind of have the right to be offended by that. We get that. But we live in a culture now, and really think about this critically, that somebody says something, let's say it's a statement that could be construed as racist, okay? But they didn't intend for it to be that way. Maybe it's just a phrase that they learned growing up. So they say this phrase. Their intent was not to be racist, but if it's interpreted as being offensive, then it's offensive. It doesn't matter any longer what that person's intent was. If somebody interpreted it as being offensive, then they're offensive, right? This is why so many people, especially with the racial conversation right now, are just scared into silence because we don't want to say the wrong thing. Because even if you don't intend to say the wrong thing, if you do, if it's interpreted as offensive, then you're marked as a racist for the rest of your life. So as a communicator, I know how impossible this is to control somebody else's interpretation. And you will have people that you'll say things, you'll do things, you weren't even thinking about them, but they will take it as an offense and they will blame you. So what do? How do you respond to that? Let me encourage you, if somebody blames you for being offensive, that there's one thing you can do and there's one thing you can ask, okay? Here's what you can do. Control the rules of engagement, okay? So it happens many times in our world that when somebody's offended, they'll fire off an angry email or fire off a text message. I have never seen a conflict get better over email or text messages. And so if somebody blames you for being offensive, they shoot an angry letter to you, what I would encourage you to do is control the terms of engagement and say, I'm happy to talk to you about this. I'm not going to do it over email. I'm not going to do it over a text message. When can we meet face to face? Now that right there will solve about 50% of your problems, right? Because as I've done this over the years, and by the way, I hate doing this. I don't enjoy doing this, but it's not about feeling safe. It's about being strong. So I've said something somebody's interpreted as offensive. Great, let's sit down and talk about it. If they're not willing to take the time to sit down and talk with me, then I don't deal with it. I say, I'm willing to deal with this. Let's sit down and talk. But if you're not willing to, then it's kind of on you, right? But I have discovered if people are genuinely offended, they'll take the time, and when we sit down and talk face to face, 9.9 times out of 10, you can resolve it if you're willing to look at each other and listen to one another. Now, there has been that one or two times in my career, in my ministry, where people just keep firing off the angry emails, right? And I'll say, I'm happy to meet with you at any time. Let's sit down and talk about this. They don't want to. They keep shooting off the emails. So I've even had with a person or two to say, don't email me anymore. Or if you do, I'm not even going to read your emails anymore. As soon as I see your name, I'm going to delete your email. But I want you to know that anytime you want to sit down and talk, I'm ready to talk about it. We're just not going to do it over electronic medium, right? So that's one thing you can do. You can actually control the terms of engagement. And going back to Matthew 18, I don't think there's a better way to handle conflict than to talk face to face. So when you do talk face to face, here's the one thing to ask. And I'm so grateful for a friend of mine years ago who gave me this counsel. When you're in a conflict with somebody, just ask them this question. What can I do for you? What do you want me to do about this offense? You've already taken my coat. Do you want my shirt as well? Ask, what can I do to resolve this conflict? Now, whatever they say, you have to be ready to hear that. It may defy common sense. It may defy your conscience, and you can't do those things, but maybe it is something you can do. Maybe you are to blame for an offense. Maybe they want an apology. Maybe they want you to make it right with somebody else, but be willing to do that if it would make that relationship better. And it doesn't feel safe, but it will make you strong. So when people insult you, when people blame you, when people manipulate you, ask to those who want to borrow from you. If somebody takes your things, don't ask for them back. We live in a very manipulative world. And we live in a world that sometimes when we're asked to give and to give things away as an act of charity and love, people will take advantage of us. That's going to happen. And I've seen followers of Jesus say, well, I tried to give over here and I was taken advantage of. I'm never going to give again. That's the wrong reaction. It's precisely because there are manipulative people in the world that people of Jesus need to continue to practice generosity. It's not the excuse that we opt out. That's the very reason that we continue, because there are manipulative people. The world needs to see authentic people. By the way, if you're taken advantage of, if you give and you're taken advantage of, you actually win because you get something called wisdom. And if you give and you're not taken advantage of, you win because you have that deep satisfaction of having done something to make a difference in another person's life. So Chief Justice John Roberts, he's been in the news this week. He was speaking a few years ago at his son's middle school graduation. And what he said here was very, very insightful. Let me just read this short paragraph. He's talking to a bunch of middle schoolers going into high school, going into adulthood. And he says, from time to time in the years to come, I hope you will be treated unfairly. Doesn't sound like your regular commencement speech, does it? I hope you'll be treated unfairly so that you will come to know the value of justice. I hope you will suffer betrayal because it will teach you the importance of loyalty. Sorry to say, but I hope you will be lonely from time to time so that you don't take friends for granted. I wish you bad luck, again, from time to time, so that you will be conscious of the role of chance in life and understand that your success is not completely deserved, and that failure of others is not completely deserved either. And when you lose, as you will from time to time, I hope that every now and then your opponent will gloat over your failure. It is a way for you to understand the importance of sportsmanship. I hope you'll be ignored so you'll know the importance of listening to others, and I hope you will have just enough pain to learn compassion. Whether I wish these things on you or not, they're going to happen. And whether you benefit from them or not will depend on your ability to see the message in the misfortunes. That's good, that last part. This is about not being safe. This is about growing strong. To see the message in our misfortunes, to see the message even when people manipulate us. So do you see what Jesus is saying here? We live in an offensive world. And because of that, you can try to hunker down and play it safe, or you can make the decision under his leadership and guidance to be strong and to take initiative, even when people insult you, even when people blame you, even when people manipulate you. And Jesus rounds off this entire strength paragraph by saying this: just as you want others to do to you, you do the same to them. There's that initiative theme again. Now, ancient scholars will say Jesus was not the first teacher to give a statement like this, and they're right. If you go back to Confucius, he said this. He said, what you don't want others to do to you, don't do to them. But if you'll notice, what Confucius says and what Jesus says are two very different things. Confucius is advocating restraint. What you don't want others to do to you, don't do to them. Jesus is saying, take the initiative. What you want others to do to you, you do to them. Confucius, it's called the silver rule, the rule of restraint. Jesus, it's called the golden rule, because it's so much more valuable to take the initiative. Here's a thought that's been rolling around my mind lately in terms of what Jesus says here. As followers of Jesus, as we move through the world, we should be looking for opportunities to practice purposeful acts of selfless service. Purposeful acts of selfless service. In fact, we've already seen a couple of those already, if you're paying attention. School districts are trying to figure out when to go back to school. And instead of complaining about my school district went back or not, what we've done as a church is let's serve teachers. Let's have a personal act of selfless service, that we find one teacher, and instead of trying to solve the big problem, we just serve one teacher, not only to give them a teacher care box, but to pray for them every month. A purposeful act of selfless service. The Bring the Change Sunday, October 11th, all right. This is a purposeful act of selfless service that you know what, there's so many problems in our world, we can't fix them all, but if I bring $1 of change, I can feed one child for one day. That's such a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but I promise you, it'll mean a lot to that child. Right now, I'm trying to think creatively about what do we do on election night? What do we do on election day when chances are partisan politics, we will not be thinking about common humanity, we will be poised for common enemy. What can we do to have a personal and purposeful act of selfless service for somebody who's on the opposite end of the political spectrum? It's all about taking initiative. It's all about loving people, and we don't differentiate between friends or enemies as we will and work towards somebody's best interest. We're not about playing it safe. We're about becoming strong. So here's the deal, and when Jesus ends with that golden rule, do to others as you would want them to do to you, I mean, that's good and that's right. But I also think as New Testament Christians, we have another view of this, that we want to do good to others because good has been done for us. The God of the universe took initiative with us. The God of the universe took initiative when he created you. The God of the universe took initiative when the incarnation took place and God came in the flesh in the person of Jesus Christ. And the God of the universe took initiative with you when Jesus Christ died on the cross to bear the weight and the burden and the guilt of all your sin. So we do good not only because we want people to do good to us, but we do good because God has done good for us. And our way of showing gratitude and living under the lordship of Jesus is allowing him to transform our character, and we take initiative even with and especially with our enemies. Did you hear about the Indian woman 2 weeks ago? She wanted to divorce her husband because he kept forgiving her. She actually said on the court document, every time I do something wrong, he forgives me. I can't live in this kind of environment. To her, forgiveness was completely alien. Listen, you and I live as followers of Jesus in an environment of forgiveness. And we want to share that with the world. Now, don't be surprised if the world doesn't know exactly what to do with that it seems strange and odd and maybe even a little threatening. But we're modeling 1 John 4:10, which says, this is love. Not that we love God, but that God loved us and sent his Son as a sacrifice for our sin. As God took initiative with us, we take initiative with the world. And we are, of all the people on the planet, the least possible to offend. Just in doing that, you will show Christ to somebody this week. Let's pray together. I want you to hear that verse again, 1 John 4:10. This is love, not that we love God, but that God loved us first. So I want you to hear today that you are loved. If you're looking for God, know that long before you started seeking for him, he has been seeking you. And God is taking the initiative by creating you, by the incarnation, and by the crucifixion. And maybe you've never said yes to that love that God has initiated. Say yes right now. Put your life under the lordship of Christ. He'll begin to change your character to be like Jesus as you spend time with him. God, I pray for every person who hears this message this week that we would, instead of playing it safe, that we would be strong. That when people insult us or blame us or manipulate us, that we would take that initiative and love. We don't have that power in and of ourselves. But we believe that since we have been forgiven much, we can forgive others as well. So I pray for that ability for our church family, that we would be light in a dark world, that we would be salt in a tasteless culture, and that we would be, of all the people on the planet, most unoffended because of your great love for us and your great love for our world. It's in Jesus' name that we offer our prayer. Amen. There's a couple of responses that I want you to consider this morning. If you're a guest, first-time guest, again, you're going to see a QR code in the bottom of the screen. I encourage you just to scan that and let us know that you've joined us this morning. We'll also make a gift in your name to Compassion International. By filling that out, you'll be taking the initiative to make a difference in somebody else's life. If you made a decision this morning, if you're ready to say yes to Jesus or take those next steps, maybe you just need to talk to somebody about where you are in your relationship with Christ. Go to our website, tulsafbc.org, and right at the front there's a button that says, I have made a decision. Click that, fill that out. That comes directly to my office. I'll follow up with you this week, and we'll see what God is going to do in your next steps in your relationship with him. Now I'm going to bless us, and we're going to worship one more time together. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may God grant you peace both now and forever. Amen.
What gift of grace is Jesus my Redeemer? There is no more for heaven now to give. He is my joy, my righteousness and freedom, my steadfast love, my deep and boundless peace. To this I hold, my hope is only Jesus, for my life is wholly bound to his. Oh, how strange and divine, I can sing all is mine, yet not I, but through Christ in night is dark, but I am not forsaken. For by my side the Savior, He will stay. I labor on in weakness and rejoicing, for in my need His power is displayed. To this I hold, my shepherd will defend me. Through the deepest valley He will lead. Oh, the night has been won, and I shall overcome, yet not I, but through Christ in me. No fate I dread, I know I am forgiven. The future sure, the price it has been paid. For Jesus bled and suffered for my pardon, and He was raised to overthrow the grave. To this I hold, to this I hold, my sin has been defeated. Jesus now and ever is my plea. All the chains are released, I can sing, I am free, yet not I, but through Christ in me. With every breath I long to follow Jesus, for He has said that He will bring me home. And day by day I know He will renew me, until I stand with joy before the throne. To this I hold, my hope is only Jesus. All the glory evermore to Him. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. I hold, my hope is only Jesus. All the glory evermore to Him. When the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. And when the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. Yet not I,